مساء الخير وأهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من برنامج واشنطن أونلاين. معي أنا هدي العويس على شبكة نورث بريس. رفض الكونغرس الأمريكي قبل أسابيع تمديد الرخصة الممنوحة لسوريا من عقوبات قيصر، استثناء اعتمده الكونغرس الأمريكي بعد أزمة الزلزال المدمر، إلا أن الكونغرس يريد اليوم إعادة تطبيق العقوبات كاملة مثل ما كانت قبل أزمة الزلزال. فكيف سيؤثر تدهور الاقتصاد على الأوضاع الأمنية في الشمال السوري وعموم الأراضي السورية؟ وهل من سبل لمساعدة الشمال السوري لتلافي عودة تنظيم داعش الإرهابي في ظل تدهور الأوضاع الاقتصادية؟ هذا ما أبحثه في حلقة اليوم من برنامج واشنطن أونلاين، وضيوفي لهذه الحلقة سيدة ميغان بوديت المديرة التنفيذية لمعهد السلام الكردي الأمريكي. ابقوا معنا لمتابعة هذه الحلقة. أهلا وسهلا بك سيدة بوديت. سيدة بوديت، رغبة من الولايات المتحدة بإنجاح مهمتها، مهمة ضمان عدم عودة تنظيم داعش وإرساء استقرار أمني في شمال سوريا، منحت مناطق سيطرة الإدارة الذاتية استثناء من عقوبات قيصر، ولكن رغم هذه الاستثناءات لا تزال الأوضاع الاقتصادية متدهورة إلى حد ما في الشمال السوري. لماذا لا نرى نتائج إيجابية لهذه الاستثناءات على أرض الواقع في الشمال السوري؟
Well, we can't separate economic security from the physical security of civilians and of the AANES and the SDF. The deteriorating economic conditions in the region make it impossible for regular families to sustain their lives, driving migration. The deteriorating economic conditions allow for bad actors like ISIS, as well as the Syrian regime, Turkey and Iran, to recruit spies and other individuals who are able to conduct attacks against the Syrian Democratic Forces and the autonomous administration by paying individuals money to inform on the locations of certain personnel that they want to target, or to become active in the cells operated by these bad actors. And of course, when there are stronger conditions, favorable conditions for recruitment by groups like ISIS, for more activity by state actors like Turkey and Iran that want to destabilize Northeast Syria, and a lower standard of living and quality of life for civilians in the Northeast, all of this makes the region weaker and less able to stand up to challenge and fight the security threats that it faces. And it harms efforts to continue to improve the situation in the region, as the SDF, the Autonomous Administration, and the people of Northeast Syria are trying to do in their efforts to build good governance, promote gender equality, religious freedom, coexistence between different peoples, and all of the other great governance programs that they're trying to implement on the ground. Those efforts haven't been perfect, though they've tried their best. And one reason for some of the difficulties is the poverty and lack of resources. So really, you can't separate the security issues and governance issues that are so central to finding a stable solution for Syria from the economic crisis in the region that, while obviously caused by a variety of factors related to the decade of devastating conflict in Syria, that does relate in many important ways to the international sanctions on the country.
هل فكرة الاستثناءات أصلاً فكرة إيجابية؟ هل يمكن مساعدة شمال شرق سوريا بينما مناطق أخرى من سوريا لا تزال خاضعة لسيطرة عقوبات قيصر؟
Well, unfortunately, that was a very well-intentioned step, and a lot of people put a lot of work into making that happen. But what we have to understand is that days after that decision was announced, Turkey began a wave of new threats and escalated air activity against North and East Syria that has continued sporadically to this day. A lot of people, a lot of analysts, as well as people on the ground, relate that Turkish escalation to that US decision, recognizing that Turkey saw any sort of economic improvement in Northeast Syria as a policy that could really strengthen the region, help it continue to provide even better security and even better governance, and give it a chance at being part of a final political settlement to the Syrian conflict, which obviously is something that Turkey, under the far-right regime of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, does not want to see happen. So a lot of people see these threats as very much connected to the economic situation, because let's face it, who wants to start a business or invest in a company if they're afraid that all of their gains could be wiped out in a drone strike, or that they themselves could be injured or killed simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Who wants to create something, build something, try to create economic recovery when they fear that their property could be expropriated by extremist militias, like countless Kurdish, Christian, and Yazidi properties in Afrin and Ras Al Ain have been, if there's another invasion of northeast Syria's territory. So those threats unfortunately worked. And then you have all of the other structural factors that make it difficult to invest, to bring resources in, to do all the things you need to do to have a sustainable, just post-war economic recovery. You have border crossings that are closed. The border crossings that are open are often restricted for very politicized reasons. The sanctions that do still exist on Syria lead to a lot of overcompliance, meaning even companies that could go into northeast Syria out of fear of violating the sanctions that have not been lifted still refuse to do so. And all of that taken together creates a situation where this very well-meaning, well-intentioned gesture simply hasn't been implemented on the ground. When I was in the region earlier this year in the spring, I asked a lot of people about this, and not one person told me that they had seen any tangible improvement. And that's a real problem because the US knows this is important. Goodness knows certainly the people on the ground in the Northeast know this is important. So figuring out how to make it work is going to be very important.
هل من أفكار أخرى يمكن أن تطبقها الحكومة الأمريكية لتفعيل هذه الاستثناءات، تفعيل فائدتها في شمال شرق سوريا، أو حتى أفكار أخرى ممكن أن تدعم الاقتصاد في هذه المنطقة الحساسة التي عانت لسنوات من التنظيمات المتطرفة؟
Well, I think in the long term, we have to address the root cause that I discussed about why these exemptions aren't working, which is that there needs to be a bare minimum level of physical security in the region in order to allow economic activity and any other kind of political governance, social activity and change to thrive. There needs to be immediate de-escalation regarding Turkey. Right now, the pace of Turkish strikes against North and East Syria has escalated. There have been recent assassinations of SDF personnel who fought against ISIS for years, attacks that have killed and injured civilians in zones that Turkey, under the terms of the 2019 ceasefire agreement, is not supposed to be attacking. The drone campaign is escalating. As many researchers, including myself, have written on, this is something that's exceedingly destabilizing. It limits the SDF's ability to provide security. It limits the autonomous administration's ability to provide governance. And it creates a climate of fear among the entire civilian population that discourages them from going to their schools, going to their businesses, leaving their homes, and certainly from interacting with and participating in governance and security structures. When, of course, one of Turkey's aims in doing this is trying to create fear among the population to drive displacement and sever the bonds between the people of North and East Syria and the autonomous administration and the Syrian Democratic Forces, the ties that have really made the administration so successful and so able to become that most stable part of Syria that it is. And then there still remains the threat of a ground incursion that would destroy everything that the autonomous administration, the SDF, and the people of North and East Syria have built overnight, that would lead to gross human rights abuses, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, like those that we've seen in Afrin and in Ras Al Ain, mass displacement, the theft and destruction of homes, properties, businesses, everything that people have built up over years and years, and serious crimes against any civilians, particularly Kurdish, Syriac, Yazidi, and other minority civilians remaining in those areas, including torture, arbitrary detention, sexual and gender-based violence, and other very serious crimes. People in Northeast Syria still fear very much all of these abuses, all of these crimes happening to them if there were to be another ground invasion. And so in this climate, addressing this threat is the most important thing that can be done to allow the economy to thrive, to allow governance to continue to improve. And there are a couple ways that the US can do that. Ultimately, the US needs to approach the regional transnational Kurdish issue and the Kurdish question in Turkey from a pro-peace perspective. The United States needs to be sending public and private signals to Turkey and to all Kurdish groups involved that de-escalation and steps towards renewed peace negotiations are what is to be done, and that any sort of steps that threaten to escalate conflict, such as the Turkish drone strikes that we've been seeing at an escalating pace in Iraq and Syria in recent weeks, are simply unacceptable. We need an end to the forms of military and political support for Turkey's military solution to the Kurdish question. F-16 sales should be off the table. Congress is taking a very principled position on that, which is a good, encouraging sign to see. There needs to be reconsiderations of the legal designations that make it more difficult for the United States to engage in promoting a political solution, such as the terror listing of the PKK. And the United States needs to simply, in its statements, when it talks about these issues, when it messages in public and private to its Turkish allies, to its Syrian Kurdish partners, to all actors involved, the messaging needs to be straightforward, honest, and pro-peace. And that's not what we've been seeing recently. We've been seeing calls on both sides to de-escalate when it's very clear that Turkey is unilaterally escalating in Syria. We've seen some really concerning comments from the State Department recently suggesting that there has not been any demographic change in Afrin, which is obviously a false claim. So we need the public statements to be talking about peace, de-escalation, and concrete steps to getting to the negotiating table. And we need the US to be reassessing the policies that it's had in the past that have encouraged Turkey to pursue military solutions over dialogue. And we need there to be rewards to all sides for de-escalation and disincentives to all sides for steps that threaten to escalate the conflict. Because at the end of the day, only a political solution to the Kurdish question in Turkey can provide stability in northeast Syria, greater stability in Iraq, better chances of democratization in Turkey, and an end to the aggressive Turkish behaviors that we've seen across the region that don't only impact northeast Syria, but have been impacting Greece, Armenia, the situation in Europe, Turkey's ties to bad actors like Russia on the international stage, and so many other international issues that matter not just to the Kurds, not just to the people of northeast Syria, but on a global scale.
شكرا جزيلا لك ضيفتي السيدة ميغين بوديت، كنت معنا من واشنطن.
Thank you, Hadil.
وفي الختام شكرا لكل من تابع حلقة اليوم من برنامج واشنطن أونلاين. ألقاكم في حلقة جديدة الأسبوع المقبل. إلى اللقاء.